97%. In the October 2025 general election, President Samia Suluhu Hassan was inaugurated for her second term, and this was the reported margin of her victory, an overwhelming 97% of the vote. And on paper, wow, that looks like an absolute mandate, right?
And this isn't exactly new. It follows a pattern from the 2020 election, where the ruling CCM party also took 97% of seats amid widespread allegations of fraud.
You know, for decades, Tanzania was seen as this beacon of stability in East Africa. It was a nation literally born from a powerful dream of unity. But today, that dream is being put to the test, and it's facing its harshest reality yet. How did a nation founded by a leader who championed unity above all else find itself so fractured, so violently at odds with itself? To understand what's happening today, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning. We're going to journey back to the founders' original vision of unity, then we'll trace the decades of opening up and then clamping down on politics, we'll see a sharp turn toward authoritarianism, and finally, we'll see how that circle of power has closed right back where we started. Our story really starts with the nation's philosophical founder, a man known simply as Mwalimu, which means the teacher, Julius Nyerere.
Nyerere's journey really is the nation's journey. In 1961, he leads Tanganyika to independence from Britain. Just 3 years later, he pulls off this historic union with the island of Zanzibar, creating the modern nation we know as Tanzania. By 67, his famous Arusha Declaration makes it official. Tanzania is a one-party state under his socialist vision. And then, in 1985, he does something almost unheard of for an African leader at that time. He voluntarily steps down, leaving behind a legacy of peaceful transition.
The core of his whole philosophy was this idea called Ujamaa, which basically translates to familyhood. It was his unique brand of African socialism, built on self-reliance, communal work, and above everything else, national unity. That was his main goal, to forge a single identity for more than 120 different ethnic groups. I mean, think about that. It's a huge task, and by and large, he actually succeeded. So, after Nyerere steps down, President Ali Hassan Mwinyi took over and began the painful process of taking apart the state-controlled economy. Then, in 1992, with pressure coming from all sides, Tanzania officially reopened the door to multi-party politics. And that was followed by President Benjamin Mkapa, who really pushed forward with privatization and free market reforms, setting a totally new economic course for the country. His successor was Jakaya Kikwete. He was a diplomat focused on international relations, and for the most part, he tolerated a critical press and an active opposition. The system, it seemed, was working. But his successor, John Magufuli, well, he was a seismic shift. They called him the bulldozer, and he was this hardline populist who cared about aggressive development more than anything else, and he immediately began a swift and dramatic clampdown on anyone who opposed him. Under his government, opposition rallies were just banned outright. Newspapers that were critical of him, suspended. New laws gave the government sweeping powers to control all media content. And the Political Parties Act was basically turned into a weapon to help the ruling CCM party. That democratic space that had been opening for decades, it started to shrink fast. Then, in March 2021, a moment of just profound crisis and uncertainty. President Magufuli died, suddenly and mysteriously, while still in office. The Constitution was clear. His vice president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, would take power. Just like that, she became Tanzania's first ever female president. An entire nation just held its breath. And this brings our story all the way back to the present day, to President Hassan's leadership and to the closing of this circle of power. At first, there was this huge wave of optimism. President Hassan actually reversed some of Magufuli's toughest policies. She lifted the ban on political rallies and gave some media outlets their licenses back. It really felt like a democratic spring was coming. But that thaw was short-lived. It was followed by a very clear pivot back to control, a return to that same authoritarian playbook that led right up to the crackdown before the 2025 election. And you don't have to take my word for it, the numbers tell the story. According to the watchdog group Freedom House, Tanzania's democracy score has been dropping. So much so that in its latest report, the country was actually downgraded from partly free to not free. That is a significant and really alarming change. So what does this control look like on the ground? Well, it's been systematic. Journalists covering protests have been arrested. The government banned the unauthorized use of VPNs, which is a key tool people use to get around censorship. The online licenses of critical newspapers were suspended. And in a really repressive move, the government altered the voter registration of about 100,000 Maasai citizens during a campaign of forced evictions. And maybe most chilling of all, a wave of irregular arrest and enforced disappearances of activists has swept the country.
The president's main rival, Tundu Lissu, was thrown in jail on treason charges. Another major challenger, Luhaga Mpina, was disqualified over technicalities.
And that really brings us to the central question we're trying to unpack here. How did a nation founded by a leader who championed unity above all else find itself so fractured, so violently at odds with itself?